Okay, awesome. So yeah, my name is Zack Merritt, and I'm originally from Summers County. Went to Summers County High School, saxophonist, and studied composition. Um, and right now, I work as the education specialist at the Clay Center for the Arts and Sciences. So I'll actually talk a bit about how my occupational journey has gone. But come on, there we go. So I studied BFA, I got a BFA in music composition from Marshall University, studied sax with Dr. Bingham and composition with Zanner. And then I went from Marshall to get my master's degree in composition from Bowling Green, where I studied composition with Christopher Dietz and Michael Keane. And then I studied music technology when I was there with Elaine Lilios, who was fabulous to work with on all things music tech. So, whenever I think about my kind of like work, I started all of this in theater before music. So when I was a kid, I was in like productions, a lot of like theatrical experience. So whenever I approach writing any sort of music or making anything, I don't really think of it as like, I want to sit down and kind of put these notes to the page, or I want to record and manipulate sound in this kind of way. I always think about like, whenever my audience comes to see one of my works, like what is that kind of experience that I can make for them? It's like, how can I kind of like alter whatever kind of concert space that is and kind of present my work in those kind of mediums. So whenever I'm making something, before I think about any kind of notes, I think about when someone sits down, what's going to happen to them like while they're here. So that's kind of like there. So that's honestly the kind of like genesis for like every bit of form of expression I do. Didn't start out that way. I started out by kind of like, you learn, especially in undergrad, you learn all of the different forms and styles of writing music. So counterpoint and serialism and literally everything. And my work is kind of influenced by all those things because you have to start like a good foundation before you can kind of like think creatively about anything. So anyway, I started with that kind of core and then I built away from it. So the next
Okay.
slide has one of the pieces from my undergraduate recital at Marshall University, where I was experimenting with a style of writing called Fluxus, which basically means you give performers sets of instructions that are incredibly open-ended, and then they perform those instructions just like you would be performing any kind of music. So in this piece, the instruction was that there's a drum major for the piece that's dressed as King George III, and then all the instrumentalists are told to wear 1960s costuming, so they should look like they're from the 60s, and play their high school fight song on their instruments. So there's like, 10 different people there. They're all playing their high school fight song. And the most beautiful and interesting thing about it is they all started and finished at the exact same time, even though they're playing completely different pieces, and that all somehow like works together. So in my kind of like Fluxus work, I was trying to, I liked how you can be incredibly open, but then beautiful kind of like moments would still happen. So in this piece, it was great because like, no matter what they did, they always started and finished together, and the tonalities were close enough where it sounded like you were hearing a high school playing their fight song, and you couldn't really tell they were doing things weird until they would start shouting different like elements for their own kind of thing. So that was kind of like my work at that point. There was another piece from this. So let me explain something really quick. My undergraduate recital started in the Smith Music Hall. There were two pieces there. And then the whole audience traveled from the Smith Music Hall across campus to Jomi. And while they were traveling across campus, there was multiple pieces happening on campus that you would run into literally. And then when you got to Jomi, the forum was kind of like half reception area and half like the final piece. So like it was kind of set up like a party. So there was like food there, and then the white upright piano that's got like the disc clavier I had like a work being played on the piano by itself. And there were some other things that were happening there. One of my favorite works from this whole concert though was called Le Chien Excité, or The Excited Dog, where it was a solo trombone whose instruction, like the score said, to get excited by the cars, bark at the cars. And that was the whole thing. And the trombonist, Andrew O'Neill, took his trombone, would make dog sounds, and was just chasing after people, chasing after traffic which I didn't tell him to do, but like he got in the spirit of everything. And it was like, I don't know, it's like one of my it's my favorite piece that I did in undergrad, actually, was that
Yeah,
piece.
he killed it. I remember
Yeah,
seeing that.
yeah.
It
And then
was
there's a
good.
sorry.
No, it was really good. Sorry.
Yeah. So then after I got my undergrad degree, I took a year off to kind of like, you know, get your portfolio together, figure out things. And then I applied at Bowling Green for the master's program there, and got the assistantship, you know, the whole kind of thing. And what's funny about it, whenever I went, the first week I was there, Dr. Lilios said to me, she goes, "Oh my gosh, wait a minute, Zach, you have the dog piece," because that was one of the pieces that I submitted, and she was talking about how much that she was like, that was like the thing that made her happy. So like, I don't know, the dog piece like definitely served me well. He did a great job with that. But when I was there, I really started to explore more with this kind of like, you go for an experience, the concert is kind of like this different state happening, and then the person performing or presenting the work is also doing things extra musical. So I would like do collaborations. The girl I'm holding there, is her name was Michiko. She was great to work with. She was a doctoral piano student, and in that piece, she was like a marionette. So I was texting an iPad in front of her what to do in the concert while the concert was happening. So I would say like, play loudly, now stop, now do this. So I was kind of like marionetting her. I was kind of playing with the idea of what a composer is. I don't know. And then there I would do other works where you would go, and this is actually this is kind of more reminiscent of like how Dandelion works. I'm going to talk about Dandelion a little bit later on, but you would watch this performer performing in like kind of like a theater set in like a different kind of space, and then like the music they're playing is more expressive. It's trying to like convey some type of message, whether you know what that is or not. So the piece of me with the saxophone, like I'm like drinking whiskey during the concert, it seems like something bad happened because I'm wearing this like dirty A shirt and like slobbing and like just growling on my saxophone kind of stuff. But that was the kind of work I was doing in my graduate degree. And then my final thesis when I was there, oops, excuse me, I'm at the Clay Center right now. My final thesis when I was at Bowling Green was drawing more on like using myself as like a performing body. So I was doing these kind of like more experiential works where I would be like, the one on the left is a piece where I'm lying on the stage with a recording of the sun for 10 minutes, like shining down on me. And the audio for it is totally just the audio from the recording. And then there's a companion piece to it called Moon. The first one was called Sun. The companion piece is called Moon, where I take the imagery used for that and completely kind of reflect it or subvert it. So it's suddenly abstracted. All of the kind of like colors change because it's all this kind of like not source material, and all the audio has then become abstracted and changed. So like none of the audio is actual source recording. It's all, most of it's been completely done with like synthesis, like it's some kind of synthesized instruments that I've built in Ableton or something like that. Or if I do use some live recording, it's been so like pulled out of that and abstractive and altered where it's like indistinguishable. Specifically, what I do a lot, my favorite thing to do is time stretch when I work with audio. So like I'll take like one moment and pull it for literally 21 minutes long. It'll be kind of happening as like the undercurrent. So like when I do use live audio and those things, it's so far removed, it's not visible anymore. So that was that. And that piece is in a black box theater. So I know it's very hard to tell from the photos. There's actually probably 90 people around me in this space, either standing or sitting on the floor, like in the dark area, because it's like a black box theater. It's a black box, and whatever you light or however you light it is the only thing you kind of see. So in the second picture, I don't know if the cameras are covering it, but you can kind of like see that a little bit. And then graduated from Bowling Green and started to think about being creative outside of school. And that's kind of like what led into Dandelion, which the piece that I had on the festival the other night, Preparation of that Cafe, that piece is part of the Dandelion concert. So Dandelion, sorry, you'll see what that is in a second. Dandelion I'll talk a little bit more about it a little bit later on, but it's this whole concert length work with me again as a performer. This time I tell a lot more stories, and you'll see photos in a little bit, but it kind of like shows how I'm taking that experience. So whenever, like I said, whenever I'm thinking about my work, I think about it totally experientially. Whenever the audience is going to see there, I think about like literally as minute as like what kind of chair are they sitting in, what does the program look and feel like, does the space have a kind of smell to it, what's the audio going to be, how long are they doing it, how long am I expecting them to sit for one moment to kind of happen, like all of these kind of like sensory experience is like all part of like what I do. So the space, everything, and if I can subvert the space, that makes it like, you know, that's for me, that's the dream. I take that idea though of like super experiential, and currently what I do is informal education. So I'm a teacher that works in a museum. I see on a normal year, this year's been, as we all know, very different. On a normal year, I'll teach probably 21 to 25,000 school kids. And then I teach like 7 to 8 weeks of summer camps. And the entire time I'm doing this teaching, I'm again thinking about like, all right, so they're coming to learn this core science concept. They're coming to learn this core engineering kind of like workshop kind of thing. And I think about from the kids' point of view, all these experiential factors that make it fun, that make it memorable, that make it all the kind of like educational mishigas that goes into this. But it's all from that same idea of like experience of the piece, whether it's an artistic experience in the case of my music and my artwork, or if it's like an educational experience to be able to like, you know, better teach. And I then take this whole idea and I teach teachers how to teach what's called STEAM, and I also do STEM as well. Yeah. So that's who I am and how I got here, like situation.
And
And to talk
you did part of Dandelion here, I think in 2017. I think
yeah,
John and Jimmy saw part of that or heard part of it.
yeah. So I did
And
Dandelion. I've done Dandelion twice at Marshall in two different forms. One
right.
was in the concert experience, and then there's another version that, and I'll talk about this, that lives in a like kind of more installation, like kind of installation version. I think I did them both.
Yeah.
Dandelion's one of the few concerts where I've done multiple times in multiple different places, which is always like weirdly enough, that's always a great feeling when you can like present a work more than one time, you know, and it doesn't just
Wow.
like live. Um, the picture is from a version of Dandelion I performed at this place in Princeton, West Virginia called the Riff Raff Arts Collective. And in my mind, when I like think about the work, it was such a great space to be able to use for it, because as you can see, they have a huge screen that is flush with the stage. So I'm able to stand in the projection that's happening. And that's like a very, you'll see that's like an element that comes back a lot with the work. And also in multiple places around, there's certain seating areas that I use. There's also lamps you'll see that if you're seeing the concert, the lamps actually change during the concert based on whenever certain things need to be more focused, when you're supposed, just helping differentiate this whole big temporal thing. Dandelion, I think, is about 40-45 minutes, like that kind of time range. So it's a, you know, it's a concert length work, but it's just like, it's like one of the ways that I manipulate things. Additionally, Dandelion has live elements in it in the form of like, there are plants in the kind of like setup of the piece, because it's kind of drawing upon the whole notion of Dandelion. Dandelion is basically me recording a lot of very natural elements and then subverting them somehow and making things seem natural that aren't natural in source material, or I make unnatural things out of very natural source material. So you'll be able to hear that. And when I'm going to talk a lot more about the preparation of that cafe video, but that whole video is completely like, it's completely subverted. And if you're watching it at a base level and listening at a base level, you won't notice it's weird at all until you really start to like kind of like think about what you're hearing when it's happening. Dandelion is set up into 9 different parts. So the first part, hello, is like the introduction. then these different parts are different like sections of it. So you can see where preparation kind of comes in and the different names. So after, and just the formatting, after Dreams of an Apple, then it goes to Lake, and that's kind of how it's read. Like I was saying, this work has also been presented not as a concert, but as like an installation. And in the installation version of it, each of these sections are different screens and elements in the hall that it's happening. So like, for instance, the photo in the bottom right is a photo of the Pets Puppy version of this, which was like presented on like an iPhone sitting on a chair. And then during Dandelion, when I'm performing it, I actually speak a lot. A lot of it's narrative from like my own personal experience, my own personal stories. So in the installation version, it's all handwritten out, and you can see how it's like kind of presented on this lamp to like illuminate it. The other thing about Dandelion is like the program in it is supposed to be like opening a packet of like letters of like different things. So in the top right, that's what's given to every single audience member, is like all this different text. The at the time with that, it was like thanking all the people that allow me to like tour around and present the concert. So it's got like a thank you list. It's got more poetry and text that goes with it, and also as well as photographs, because all those things just help get you kind of like transported into that like environment, like physical environment, audio environment, everything. So this, I think it's, yeah, this is going to be a clip of different parts of Dandelion, just to kind of get you in the idea of like what the whole experience is like. So if you've never seen it, here's hopefully a quick bit of it. There we go. Can you guys hear it, by the way?
No. Did you click share audio? Let's see if it works. There we go.
Hello. Welcome to Dandelion. So part of the reason I wanted to share that is so you can kind of get a scope for what the whole concert looked like and kind of why some of the choices in preparation were made. Let me stop my share now so I can kind of talk about it a bit more. Okay. But the piece from the other night, Preparation of that Cafe, is a part of the concert that's, it doesn't, when you look at the list, it doesn't seem like it's in the middle, but it's right about the middle of the whole concert experience. The first work on the concert, with the blades of grass, that's kind of pretty stark focused, and the kind of like synthesized ambient sound, that's about 9 to 10 minutes long. I read during, I kind of narrate during part of it, introduce the audience, explain who I am, because me as the figure in that, I'm kind of acting removed from it a little bit, where I'm like speaking in third person about myself. That's like a common element in the whole concert. But it's all very green and very long because it helps people get adjusted to the concert. There's this long intro ambient thing just to help people get settled in it, hear this kind of similar thing happening and happening and happening and happening, because it just helps them kind of relax, get to rest. Mostly because it starts out, they're like, oh, this is interesting. And then after a minute, they're like, this is boring. And then after like 6 minutes, they're like, oh, it's kind of interesting again. It's like, I have to like have it happen that long to help finally get to like a nice like ending part. One of the common elements in all of my work is I like to have very long sections of things where it's seemingly ambient, seemingly not a lot of is happening, but it just helps the audience get settled, I always think, and like really kind of like be able to like live in this kind of like very different world in some cases. Preparation is great though, because that whole video is when you watch it, it is seemingly like source material. I'm in black and white. Also, that's the first time in the whole concert, there's no color and the lights in the space are out. So all you can see in that experience is that source video. So the whole black and white thing is happening, me chopping up the vegetables, me doing all this kind of stuff, and then eventually me shaving my beard off. And then that's that whole section. What's great about it is if you watch the audio, the things you're hearing aren't correlating to anything on the screen. So you hear this like whistle, this like humming kind of thing that's a tea kettle going. The tea kettle is visible on the screen and it is obviously not boiling. It's open, so there's no water in it. And then you see me cutting mushrooms and there's no audio that goes with the cutting motion, but you hear like thuds and traffic going by, which what seems realistic, like you can kind of believe it's like, oh yeah, that would be happening there. But when you're actually watching it, nothing really matches up. And the whole arc of that video, and the reason it kind of works as its own video, you can finally start to realize that like something is up whenever I start knitting, because, and in the process of knitting, you keep repeating forever. So I'm like going and going, and then finally you realize it's a loop, because like you realize my hands are happening. There's like this kind of jerky motion before I get to the beard. The whole beard section of the video is just a segue to get out of that into the next bit. So that's the reason that's kind of like they're like that. So whenever I'm thinking about that work in particular, I'm thinking about how it fits in the whole grand scheme of things, how it can perform as almost like, if you think about like fine dining, there's like different courses. It's like maybe more like an appetizer or like entree course, whereas something else might be like something else. It's just like almost like a palate cleanser kind of situation. Yeah, but yeah, that's that work. And yeah, does
Well, I have to admit, watching it, and then I went back to it today to check on the tea kettle.
well, because that's the thing that when I put it in there, I was like, this is the thing that I wonder like if people notice it on first glance. That's the element that I tried to make more in the foreground, where it's like something's off. But like it's
Yeah.
also, whenever you hear so many, as you guys probably know, whenever you hear so much new music, it's not weird to hear like whistling sounds that are going crazy and have this like video happening. So it's like there's some like interesting play with like new music tropes happening in that video a little bit as well. But like I try to in Dandelion, one of the things I say a lot is it's not that serious, just come to it as you are kind of like situation. So I try to make it multi-level with it.
Yeah, I like that. Well, one thing I noticed during the performance on Friday was you hear the water boiling, and
Mhm.
then it's like after the whistle sounds, then the video we get. Are there blank screens in the video? Because I don't know if the
Yeah, yeah,
stream.
no,
Okay,
very well. It goes to
yeah,
black.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
Because
So
also during the original concert, it goes to black because those moments you're in pitch darkness now as the audience member. Like you're kind of like in sensory like readjusting moments with that's why it kind of has those clips and cuts in it.
yeah, cool. Well, any other questions or thoughts about what Zach has told us so far?
I have a statement, if that's okay.
Oh, I love your donut. Look at that.
Oh,
Sorry.
thanks. Um, this just all reminds me a lot of experimental theater in a way.
Mhm.
I took a script writing class like a really long time ago, like in high school at a summer camp, and we just started talking about that because, like, I guess one kid was just like writing just random stuff. And it was kind of
Mhm.
entertaining because, like, you never knew what was going to happen. And this just gives me all the same kind of vibes of that.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, that was just my comment. That was it.
So, speaking on that a little bit, part of when I was talking about like the Fluxus school, the Fluxus period of art is very much kind of like when you think about experimental theater, like that kind of like experimental work, or the work of Yoko Ono, for instance, it's all kind of either part of Fluxus or definitely influenced by Fluxus, where the kind of instruction for the work is the is like the whole like crises or the whole thing of the work. So like in my point of it is like I like the kind of like serendipitous results that you can get out of like acoustic players if you tell them it's like play as loud as possible and then go. And then if you have like a performer that's practiced and pretty well versed in their instrument, they can make amazing things whenever you tell them just to like when you give them that freedom and that ability to go. Um, you do have to sometimes have performers that are confident and well versed in their instruments and like comfortable performing. Like one of the reasons the dog work I talked about worked so well is because Andy spent time, he rehearsed it a lot and found the best ways to manipulate his trombone to sound like a dog. He figured out the best way he could manipulate his body to like have like very canine movements almost. So like even with work that is so up to the performer, so like so much is like devoid, like I'm not telling you to play blah 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 for blah 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 amount of time. There's still a lot of like craft that can go into it from a performance standpoint. It's like you can go to this kind of work being very like, oh, it's like a joke piece or like something that it's kind of more throwaway. But the problem with that sometimes is you don't get the same kind of rich results that you would get. It's the same thing if you hear like a third grader playing like Bach at the piano and you're like, wow, they're technically proficient, but then you're like, I don't want to listen to this. It's just like a very computerized version of Bach coming out of this person, you know. Like there's a certain amount of craft and like I don't want to say like soul, but like I don't know, maybe. I don't like getting into like that kind of concept because then it's like you have the whole like explosion of like objectivity, subjectivity kind of stuff. Yeah. My background's also in theater though. I had a theater company for 10 years in Southern West Virginia. And then I still to this day like write write musicals, write different things for people around. Like I work with the Alumni Arts Center a lot around here. So I do have, like I said, I got my start in theater before I got my start in music.
So when you showed the piece in Princeton, did the people know some of those locations?
So the funny thing about it, when I showed the piece in Princeton, some of the locations were present. Most of them aren't though. A lot of them are from Appalachia, from here all the way up into Vermont. The thing about the Princeton show that was very interesting, there was a lot of people who knew me and my family a lot more deeply. So whenever I like, there's a lot of like storytelling, me reliving moments of my past. it was interesting to do that there because like they know the people I'm talking about. They know these like situations. So that was like the most interesting thing about that. Like my mom saw that version of the piece and like I like look over at one point and she's like crying because like the kind of like what is it, the like climax of the whole thing is like this video of my mother that she took of me right when I came back from like a trip when I was like, I don't know, 5 or something like that. And in the video recording, I didn't use the audio because it's so sad, but in the video recording, I asked my mother what happened to this dog named Pet. And Pet died when we were away. But I'm like, where's Pet? My mom's like trying to steer it where she's like, how was the vacation? Was it fun? And I'm like dealing with mortality for the first time in my life. And my mother has the whole thing on a VHS. So it's like, it was like this, I was like, when I saw that, I was like, oh, that's like a great like kind of arc to the whole thing. So it's funny to me because like when I showed it like in like Ohio and like all these other places, they're like, what's this weird thing with this kid? But then when I showed it to that audience of people, they were all like, I remember when you look like that kind of like attitude. So it's like, yeah, it's funny. I that's the thing I liked about that work is each audience I presented it to, different parts of the whole thing they could pull from it. And for me, that's what's so rich, like enriching about working with an audience.
Yeah, it certainly has a, because you're working with the visual imagery and it's the piece has a kind of dramatic flow,
Yeah,
and there's so many questions that are unanswered, I think, just kind of from what I've seen in it, that
totally.
you begin if you try to make sense of it, all you get are just kind of more experiences from the,
Mhm.
or more questions rather about the experience of the piece. So yeah, it's much different than hearing an orchestra piece or something where you might have questions about, oh, what is this sound or something like that. But
Mhm.
depending on how you're listening to it, the experience will be rich, but it won't draw in all of these externals. It's kind of
Yeah.
funny, because of what you're saying about time stretching and so forth. So your your electronic music, if you will just kind of address that
Mhm.
notion of time stretching, is in a way kind of anti-acousmatic in that you don't want us to hear the reference of the
Yeah.
sound, but the work itself makes you have a reference in a way, or is that
Yeah.
unintended?
No, that's totally intended. Like whenever I'm finding source material, a lot of times I find the source because I'm like, I know it's this piece that's like very biological, or I know it's this piece that's like somehow narrative and focused. So I like found like people eating dinner, or like this sounds really weird. When I was at Marshall, I had a Zoom recorder and I literally used to just record people in public all the time, like at the dining hall and different things. And I would use that as my source material because you would hear muttering, you would hear someone drop something. And then if you take that into audio, and stretch it out, you have like whoa, whoa, like low basses from the murmurings that it's just like noise and different and altered enough. And then whenever you would have like something dropping, suddenly that's like a crescendo off kind of like situation just from stretching it. I also reverse audio a lot, which takes this notion and completely even makes it a whole lot more because then the entire like the entire like uh any sense of like recognizability, I don't know if that's the word I'm looking for, but it's like totally lost on it by reversing it for the same reason. And the reason I use these kind of sounds, like the reason my electronic music sounds the way it does is because I like those sounds. So I like Brian Eno-esque ambient, like very long drawn out kind of things. That's the stuff I like to listen to. So that's, that's why I write that or make it that way.
Any other questions, thoughts?
I have
Go
one.
ahead. Go ahead.
Yeah. Okay. It's really nice this type of work, like close to the theater. And in Brazil, a lot of people do that, but it's hard to find funding to do this type of
Mm-hmm.
experimental work. So how you
Totally.
do to find funding, or you pay yourself for everything?
So when I was doing Dandelion, I approached it through either lucking out and like contacting universities where I went there and I was able to kind of like ask like I want to present this concert. can we help figure this out kind of situation. And then other times, like the Princeton show, for instance, that one, I charged admission and I paid into the venue to be able to like perform there. So I kind of took a more like, I don't know, almost like how a DJ or like an artist would like go and like, you know, you got your contract figured out, but like maybe half the ticketed cost goes back to the venue and you take half, kind of like situation. However, however that is. And then for nowadays, my current work, a lot of it is weirdly drawn by my current occupation. So I don't remember how many years ago this was, but I did a performance at Marshall for one of the festivals with me in a white suit, and there were colored lights on me, and I was playing colored water to make like audio happen, and the lights would change based on like the way I was playing the water. That piece started because I needed to build an installation here at the Clay Center to teach kids about additive color mixing. So I had this like installation already made, and I was like, well, let me just make it a performance while I'm at it. So like sometimes, like I said, my current job is allowed me the freedom to be able to like do other things. And then the other half of my work, like kind of my more theatrical half, is like I said, I owned a theater company. So our whole thing was writing for grants. I've written so many grants to like different local organizations, state culture organizations for different things to be able to fund for kind of I say my work. I worked with the poet. We're long-term collaborators. Like I don't know, since like 14. But she and I work together on all that kind of stuff. But it's a lot of grant writing, asking, sending emails saying, hey, what's the likelihood of this? What I'm such a believer in just ask, and the worst they can say is no. So I'm the worst. I'm like, can I do this? Is that okay? And if they say no, I'm like, okay. Like I don't know. Yeah, but that's kind of like that's what I would say about like that kind of stuff. And get good at grant writing. Like that's the thing that I've learned most about working in the arts in any kind of way. Is like grants help with so much.
Yeah,
At least
absolutely.
me. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, it's a good approach to just ask.
Yeah. Because you never know what they'll say, is what I always think.
Well, I predict in the climate of the next few years, there will be more money from granting institutions because a lot of foundations are getting fat during this time period.
Oh yeah, that, and I can speak, probably not should speak, but I can speak that currently I agree with that statement based on current employment, I'll say.
Sure. And I like your approach. I think the what has happened for you has been really nice in terms of like the Clay Center. Now, I don't know a lot about what you're doing, but just kind of what you're talking about today, it seems like just kind of a natural extension of what you're doing. Do you feel like in this work that your employment that you are able to access or use a lot of your creativity? Or I mean, talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, so that's a very good question. My current job as education specialist, it's a confusing title because it's actually the doctoral terminal degree in the education field is the name of my job, which I don't have. But what I really do is, forgive me if any of this is like very normal. When I entered this job, when I went to grad school, I learned a lot about this kind of world. That's a good segue. My graduate assistantship at Bowling Green State University was not a theory tutor. It was not music teaching, TAing for music appreciation. I was not a TA in the sense. I was a assistant in the Arts Village, which is a living learning community. So I had, I think, 150 freshmen and sophomore art majors. So that's visual arts, theater arts, musical arts. Up there was also literary arts, dance, and something else. There was something else. And then we also just had students that liked the arts. So like I had like biology majors that were like, I don't know, they were like in the marching band and things like that. And my role there was I was tasked with doing programming for the students. So that means any kind of like extra musical thing experience I could like be able to secure for them. I would generally a lot of times take them to concerts in the music hall. If they weren't concerts, I would take people to art gallery opens, theater productions, all that kind of things. I would like lead the students with the sign-up sheets. I took them to downtown Detroit. I took them on trips to Chicago, trips everywhere, showing them different things. And at that point in my life, I was really interested in trying to figure out what it means to like work with all the different kinds of arts. Now as an adult, I'm like, I just work with whatever I want to work with, and I don't worry too much about those semantics. But at the time, like I was, talking about Van Gogh to them at the Chicago Art Institute, like giving like an art tour to like the kids and stuff like that. So I was working in programming that way. Whenever I left, I used that skill set and started working in the Clay Center, the Clay Center in the Discovery Museum. So I don't really do a lot of work with the performance hall because it's a totally separate thing. And most of the time, those are traveling acts that are coming through. The symphony is like an exception to that, where it's like a local organization that does concerts there. But like, like for instance, I always tell people, like when Willie Nelson is here, I don't get to meet him. Like I'm like, I can buy a ticket if I want to, kind of like situation. But my job in the Discovery Museum is to do educational programming. So I will write, science demos, workshops of all kinds of things. But my background is in STEAM and Maker, which is a really fancy way of saying I like to combine things and teach all the subjects in one experience. Like as opposed to trying to be like, here's a math problem, which who would go to a museum and do math problems? No one, you know what I mean? So my job currently has so much creativity in it, where every single point in the day, I have to think about a new experience or a new way of teaching some kind of concept better. Because the thing I always tell teachers and everyone, kids are always changing because society is always changing around them. So you always have to keep up with society changing around these kids. The kids themselves are always the same. They're always going to break things. They're always going to have fun. They like to learn by having fun and causing ruckuses, but society changes around them. So you have to kind of keep up with that. So my whole job is always thinking about like how to best present things for kids. And I do get to talk about music a lot. Like obviously that's going to be my natural thing, is to like explain to kids like how sound works and like, use like steel pipes and ignite a grate in the bottom so the whole thing sings, and I'm using like a blowtorch. Like they're gonna love it, Like anytime liquid nitrogen comes out, I make an explosion. I like splash things. I'm in the planetarium and like showing them things, which is just a giant immersive space. Like they're gonna love it, Thinking creatively is what I've learned through all of my education. How to like solve problems, how to be expressive in whatever kind of media it is. So like I said, when I was in your shoes, I was still being creative by writing out everything, by following different forms of compositional methods, and like kind of I spent my time at Marshall really exploring so many different types, because I think it's important to be able to see. One of the best things I ever read was Fuchs's Counterpoint book. Like that was one of the most eye-opening things in the world for me at that age. If you haven't read it, I swear you need to like sit down with it. It's a good read. It really is.
Yeah.
You think I'm joking? I'm not.
I'm not. I don't think you're joking. I love reading. What are you talking about?
Yeah.
But I've got about time. Well, time for one more question. Any questions? Any other questions?
Yeah. We have a whole folder in our Blackboard sections now called "How to Get Paid," or no, it's just called "Get Paid" now. So how did you actually like go about landing the gig that you have now, and how do we?
Oh my gosh.
How do these we as potential people in the field try to get a job?
Yeah, that's a great question. I'm going to answer it while I also grab my charger. I'm wearing headphones so you can hear me. I think the way I got the current gig I'm in now is I was confused out of grad school trying to figure life out, and was looking at Indeed for job openings. And I saw an opening for it. At the time it was called Gallery Educator here at the Clay Center. And I applied for it and got it. And when I got the job, I realized what it really was a like floor staff person. So I was like the person in the different exhibits that was making sure they didn't explode and making sure that children weren't jumping off of the ceiling. I wish I was kidding, kind of stuff. And then through that entry job, I was able to kind of show my creativity in it, just by working. I realized I lucked out with a lot of this by working, and through that, God offered more employment. An anecdote I always tell really quickly. I was giving a demo for a bunch of school kids, like 300 kids in front of me. I have a giant, it's right here, a giant tank of Madagascar hissing cockroaches, and I'm giving this whole big demo with them. I'm in a new space, so it's kind of warm. If you don't know anything about Madagascar cockroaches, when they get warmer, they start to think it's springtime and start to go into certain biological processes, which when you have third graders in front of you, it's great fun to talk about. This is all happening while my now current boss is watching me. And after I got done presenting, they're like, I need to talk to you. And I was like, oh my gosh, you're gonna say something about these roaches like mating in front of all these children. And then it turned out they were offering me a job because of the way I was able to creatively solve all these kind of different things. So I just work really hard. I have a lot of other friends though that are taking more a traditional approach to composition. And some of the ways that they are able to make money is like, this sounds bad, but they have like a day job that like helps them pay for a couple of things, but then they write grants. I keep going back to grants, but grant writing is like one of the biggest things that allows them to be able to like buy the equipment or buy the resources they need to be able to produce this thing. I mean, in the state of West Virginia, especially if you are West Virginian, if you have like an idea for like some kind of like project or something like that and can like, you know, like write a grant that like justifies like how it helps benefit the culture of West Virginia. There's a lot of like arts and culture grants that are specifically for those kind of like projects things. Even it's as simple as like, I am an artist that needs like a new camera for something. There's like grants that you can like help to apply for. So my thing is always, like I said, always ask. And also when you're in an interview, try to be, I don't know, I'm pretty extroverted. So I talk a lot and I don't know if that's helped me at all. Who knows? I had like my whole life has felt like weird, like situations with how I get from one place to another. So that's how I did it.
Well, it all seems very natural.
Yeah.
And now at Marshall, they have this creative discovery grant. So if you get the summer one, I think it's it's a 3,000 or I think it's like $3,000. So it's you know, for undergraduates, junior, senior level, and then I don't know if you remember Sean Price. Was he here when you were here?
He was here. I think he was there after I was there, but
Just
I know
after.
who you're talking about. Yeah.
Yeah, because he got the West Virginia Division of Culture and History Development Grant, which is renewable for multiple years. Yeah, I mean, I appreciate you saying that because it's I think it is an important thing to be aware of and to at least make a strong effort to attach yourself to it and try to get some work presented. And not only does it help you, like if you've written your first grant, and hopefully you can share your, we got to go here in just a second, but after you've written one grant, you have material for your next grant.
100%. That's the reason I was able to run a theater company for years, is because I had the previous records and budgets of like what the money went to that I was like, please give me more money. Look, I used it the last time. Like that speaks volumes.
Yeah, right on. Well, Zach, it's been amazing. I appreciate you stopping by for us, and good luck with everything. I'm gonna probably post this for Festival Band here in a few weeks, so I'll send you the link. But we do appreciate you greatly stopping by and taking a little time to meet with us today.
No problem. I appreciated meeting all y'all.